Welcome, everyone. My name is Felipe. Once again, I am here with the Charter for Compassion. We are so excited to welcome you all to our Global Read webinar series. Today, our Global Read is on the book Becoming Wise, an inquiry into the mystery and art of living with Krista Tippett, who is here with us. Thank you so much for joining us. She is not only the author of this book, but the broadcaster of Own Being, the podcast. And we are so excited to have our friend Parker Palmer, who was also a guest for our Global Read with Heart of Democracy that we had in September. So Parker, thank you so much for being here and for being our facilitator for this conversation. And I think that with that, I will leave the room for you two to start the conversation. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, Felipe. I'm just waiting for the screen to give me a view of me and Krista and the audience. Let's see. There we go. Now I've got it. Thank you very much. And thanks to the Charter for Compassion and to folks from around the world who've come to learn from Krista today, and that includes me. Krista is really is one of those people who needs no introduction. So I'll limit myself to just a few words for those who might be here by accident. Not only is Krista the founder and host of the widely praised On Being Project, she's also a New York Times best-selling author, winner of a Peabody Award, and recipient of a National Humanities Medal during the Obama administration. For me, more important than all of that, Krista is a great friend and colleague. She's helped many promising young people find a platform. That includes me, of course. And she's the proud mother of two adult children to whom her book, Becoming Wise, is dedicated. And she's someone whose laugh can light up a room. So, Krista, I'm delighted to welcome you to this combination salon and seance.
Well, thank you, Parker. And I just have to say that your friendship and that you're such a teacher to me and also such a friend across many years. I remember, I think the first time we met, I mean, I'd met you through your writing, but that we sat looking over Ground Zero the year after 9/11. So we really started a conversation at the beginning of the century and have kept talking ever since.
Thank you. I remember it well. It was such a powerful and moving experience to
Yeah.
see that and to be in dialogue about it.
Yeah.
So, Krista, this will come as no surprise to you, but as we get into our discussion of your book, I'm going to open things by asking a version of the question you always ask your guests, right?
Okay.
My form of the question is this: what were you taught in childhood that you internalized as wisdom? And do you see a through line from that to your understanding of wisdom today?
Mm, such a good question. So I'm just going to go with my gut, right? I think if I thought about this for 5 minutes, I'd probably have all kinds of complicated answers. I'm not sure that the notion of wisdom was very alive in my childhood. I'm not sure that's a word I heard people use. Um, I think that, I grew up in this really religiously immersive world. Although a lot of it was more about, it was the heart of social life. It was the heart of culture. It's where our friends were. That I think something I've been grateful for and become more and more grateful for as something that it was bequeathed to me was a sense that there is love behind this universe.
Mhm.
And what I'm going to say also is, and I think my grandfather, my Southern Baptist preacher grandfather, who was such an important figure in my life, he taught me about God and about wisdom, but in the best possible way, because he was a very complicated, contradictory character.
Mhm.
He was all about rules. He was really strict. I think he was uncomfortable he wasn't taught to use his beautiful mind. I don't think he was very comfortable with his body, with his desires, with his passion. And yet he was the funniest person I knew. He was very loving. And so I think, like, I don't go through the world with rose-colored glasses on. I think it's all complicated. I think we're complicated. I don't consider myself to be an optimistic person in the sense that I think everything's going to turn out all right. But I do have this bedrock trust that the most real thing and this persistent abiding thing that we have to actualize, we have to make it more felt and manifest with our lives, with how we're present to it, how we draw it forth and believe in it, right? Though is that there is goodness and there is love. And love, I also understand to be as much about acting as about feeling.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I think that combination of elements, the darkness and the light, is one of the great appeals of your work. So that when you talk about love, people aren't experiencing sentimentality, but they're experiencing something much more grounded. And I find it very interesting that your Oklahoma roots kind of introduced you to that through this complicated
Yeah.
figure of your grandfather. And I'm reminded of Joseph Campbell, who said, "There's no work of art that does not have the dark thread running through it." And what you do is works of art.
Mm.
So let's move it along. For you, wisdom is not a set of conclusions, which is where I think a lot of people end up with that word.
Yeah.
But you see it as an ongoing process of becoming, of learning to engage fruitfully with ourselves and with each other and with the complicated mysteries of the world. That's a challenge for individuals, and I'd love to hear you talk about um, pathways that you have discovered during your interviews with a lot of folks who have helped walk the path of wisdom with you. But it's an even bigger challenge for a culture in which we can't even agree on what's true and what's false,
Yeah.
on the value of science itself, or the value of literature and the arts. So starting wherever you'd like, on either an individual level or a societal, institutional level, what do you see us needing to do to advance in wisdom besides listening to On Being?
Yeah, well, I think when we're talking about wisdom, we're in the realm of truth, which has facts in it, but it also is about a lot that fact alone cannot convey. And it is as much, it resides in human bodies as much as it resides in our heads. And, you know, when I wrote the Becoming Wise book, I mean, I'm a very tortured writer in general, but I spent a couple of years just like delving into the archives to try to discern themes that ran all the way through that were recurrent. And these I kind of understood as qualities of wise and graceful lives, and tried to put some nuance and kind of flesh on those bones. And you know, it's how we use the incredibly powerful tool of our words, which we don't, you know, which I think we wield in this culture and this time so carelessly and often callously. But it's such a power, just an everyday, ordinary, minute to minute power, you know, and how we inhabit our bodies, which is also our presence, and you know, faith, whatever that means for us, and love, and this muscle of hope. Those were things that carried through. But one thing that happened to me at the end of the writing is people started asking me for my definition of wisdom. And I realized I had never defined wisdom. In that book, I had described how it manifests, how it is made manifest. But what came to me, and this has been really helpful for you to walk around with, and especially I think in this time, is, you know, a life of wisdom can be a life of knowledge and accomplishment, of course, but I think like not a knowledgeable life, an accomplished life, these are things that we can like point at and quantify in some way, kind of we can describe. But I think that a life of wisdom, the measure of a wise life is the imprint that life makes on lives around it, on other lives. And I think that that holds true, like any of us. And I think also most of the wise people in the world are not famous, but all of us have known wise humans. And if we think about them, I think immediately what we know is how they touched and imprinted, and how what they what that wisdom they possess kind of rippled in real, through other lives and bodies and communities.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. It reminds me, Krista, of the number of times I've talked to people and asked, tell me about an elder who made an impact on your life. And they'll say, well, you never heard of this person,
Right.
but, and then
Yeah.
there's a story about a teacher or a neighbor or a grandparent who really lives on in that person's life. So in a way, that's kind of our best chance of immortality, I guess,
Yes.
uh, of continuity in life. I've had a working definition of truth that sounds congruent with what you're talking about regarding wisdom. My definition of truth is an eternal conversation about things that matter, conducted with passion and discipline. So if
Wow.
you want to be in the truth, it's not enough to rest in conclusions because they keep changing. You have to know how to be in the conversation.
Right.
And it seems to me that, in a way, is a definition of the work you've been doing these many years. And in the book, you share that conversation with us and you let us become part of it as you do on air as well. Is that the way you think about your own work? And is that one of the answers to what we need to do societally, institutionally, to keep this conversation going?
Yeah, I love that. I love, like, I mean, for me, I've just realized, and maybe just because I've practiced this, but for me, like all learning now is conversational. I learn what I think conversationally, and I grow conversationally. Um, I think I really like how you just talk about truth, and I also would say I think in our time, for example, one of the dynamics is us wanting other people to understand the facts, to get the facts, as though the facts ever have been what moved
Mhm.
people. And I think that actually what we want is to live with some shared truths, but truths have to, I think this isn't very logical, but then we are not logical, right? Like we think we're logical, but we're not, none of us. Daniel Kahneman, the great social psychologist who won the Nobel Prize in economics, he won that for saying that this whole idea that was behind all of Western economics, that essentially we are rational actors, and okay, a little bit irrational, but my irrationality will cancel out your irrationality. It's just not true. He said, none of us, however educated we might be, is as rational as we think we are. The thing is, what's interesting is that I can't, truth, whatever I want to convey to another person will not land in their bodies and hearts and minds. Like, really, actually, how do we, hearts open first and then minds open, right? So if I don't actually care about you, like what,
Mhm.
so that is that is actually a pragmatic truth, that this is the way we function. Um, it will land in a barren place if I just want to convey my facts to you or beat you over the head with them.
Mhm.
You have to know sense, and we sense this at an animal level as much as at a cognitive level, that it matters, that I care, that the reason I want to convey this truth, and part of it may be facts, is because we're in this together, and we are here to accompany each other. So
Yeah.
it's that spirit, it's that the fullness of our humanity wrapped around what it is that we want to share. And then also I have to be ready for my heart and mind to be opened as well. And so it's the conversational nature of any kind of encounter.
Mhm. You remind me of a line, you'll know this better than I do because you know poets and poetry. I think it was Elizabeth Alexander who ended one of her poems, or said in one of her poems, "Are we not of interest to
Yeah,
one another?" Right?
to each other. Yeah,
And that's such a gorgeous line.
yeah,
And it sometimes in today's world, it feels like the answer is no, I'm not interested in you and you're not interested in me.
yeah,
But this points toward your understanding of community, right? Which is the big word that embraces a lot of how you understand wisdoming, the process
yeah.
of conversational wisdom. And so to again ask about the societal or institutional level, we have these institutions, a lot of them are struggling today to figure out who and what they are called to be in this world. But we have these institutions that are meant to create pockets of community where people can develop the muscles to connect these ways, the heart muscle, the tissue, the fabric of life. We have institutions like educational institutions and religious communities, voluntary associations of various sorts. All right, do you see those as an important part of the puzzle that we have to put together going forward in the 21st century?
Of course they are, but quite apart from all of the distress and, kind of, there's a lot of chaos right now. There's a lot of that's falling apart or being torn apart. But I think even before this moment, I've been aware for a long time that we kind of came into this century with forms for our institutions that no longer made sense. That we came in, it's like the basic things, like the school doesn't quite, it's not what it should be, right? And legal systems and politics and healthcare, right? Like these basic institutions. And even the people, the most brilliant people inside these institutions know that they're not quite what they should be. So we were already this generation of our species that was called to be like social creatives. So yes, we need institutions, but you know, with a lot of good intentionality, but with also perhaps too much technocratic, overly cognitive ways of creating. The way we've done institutions, like even spiritual institutions, has not has been somewhat dehumanizing, right? Has had a tendency to even bureaucratize the heart, the reason the institutions came into being. So I think we have to, one of the things about now is that so much is breaking, and there are so many sharp edges to that breaking, and many of us are called to be present to the real human pain and suffering that is on those sharp edges. And where much is breaking, much is going to be born. And I think holding both of those kinds of callings, all of those kinds of callings, and remembering that we were already going to have to reinvent a lot of this to be humane, fully humane.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it is, what a thing to be alive, to be in this generation of our species, right? Like there's so many individual things we could name about being alive now that are daunting. And also, like, what a majestic thing to be a generation of our species that has to remake the world. And I think hanging on to both of those realities is also a matter of seeing different spans of time there's the immediate work, and then there really is the importance of holding on to that long arc, right? And so that I'm thinking about all of that right now.
Yeah.
And I
And
think wisdom, right? Wisdom, and not mere knowledge, and not mere action, discernment, right? When we have to hold those different spans of time, so important.
yeah, what if we had a politics driven not by the information they get from polling, but by wisdom
Yeah,
about the
yeah,
common good? Wouldn't that be keen?
yeah. And also just I'm spending a lot of time with people, just stressing the importance of devoting some time and attention to making sure you're asking the right questions,
Mhm.
better questions,
Mhm.
because answers mirror the questions that they meet. And I think often we don't even pause to interrogate the questions we're asking. We're in a panic. I mean, everything is urgent right now on in some level. There's so much that is urgent. There's so much that's needed and immediately. And yet we waste a lot of time and money and energy rushing to solutions that we then have to undo or make better or modify or adapt to complexity. I think
Mhm.
that's a lot of the story of our time.
What I'm thinking about as I hear you talk, Krista, is I'm not sure you've addressed this, although you probably have somewhere in your really large body of work. I think you model a different kind of leadership, the kind we need in our time. And I'm thinking now back to those religious institutions and educational institutions where so for so many years the participant experience, the user experience, as they
Yeah.
say in the tech world, has been that of going in, sitting down in a chair or in a pew, and listening to some expert deliver conclusions.
Right.
Often deliver answers to questions you're not asking, as the listener, right? Um, the the kind of leadership that is called for, I think, in those places is leadership that makes space for conversation, that engages the student or the worshiper, the parishioner, because we care about one another. We are of interest to one another, and we're on a
Yeah.
shared journey. And so I think in a lot of ways, implicit in the work you do is this model of leadership. And I'm wondering if that's a topic you've explored with folks who are in positions of leadership in some of these different settings.
You know, I struggle to think of myself as a leader, right? And I don't know if that's because of the heavy-handed definition that I grew up with of what leadership looks like. Um, if this is leadership, it's subversive to that. Um,
That's the point.
right. um, I think leaders have answers, and I have questions. But you know, I in science, which really is one of the most like so much we can despair about looking around the world right now, but what is happening on our scientific frontiers, both how we're seeing the cosmos and how we're seeing the intricacies of the human body, uh, it is so magnificent and thrilling. And in science, everything proceeds with the next question. Like, one thing I love about scientists is even in the moment that they make the amazing discovery, what they're excited about is what questions this will yield that we can now pursue. You know, so it's not inaction. It's not like you're asking questions and not doing anything.
Right.
But you are being led by curiosity and inquiry and awe, and then a reverence for what you uncover and what you make happen. but not seeing that as finished or the last word, because nothing ever works like that in human life. Or like Garrison Keillor, who I have mixed feelings about, but like he had this thing to say, remember, every solution is only temporary, which
Mhm.
is like a folksy distillation of the Buddhist cosmology of impermanence, right? Or right, I mean, we know this, Quakers know this. It's like we're always dealing with things that are ephemeral. But as human beings in our bodies, we can scarcely let that in, much less live that way. But in fact, it is reality. It is true.
Mhm.
So I wonder if I think, I think about Teilhard de Chardin, who believed, who actually was uncovering, a Jesuit paleontologist who in the beginning of the last century was uncovering the biological, the physical remains of our ancestors, of human evolution, and believed that the next stage of evolution would be spiritual. And I think we only are, we might survive this century moving forward as we do, or some remnant of us, but I don't think we flourish as a species if we don't evolve spiritually in the most expansive sense of that word, the way you've always worked with that word, the way I work with that word.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
and somehow I think what you and I are circling around, like this leadership has a spiritual component in that it actually, to me, it's more reality based than the kind of, we'll solve the problems, we'll have the 5-year plan, we'll do the strategic thinking, we'll do the strategic planning and it will be okay.
Mhm.
Nothing will happen that, I really think we've been disabused collectively of the notion that things will not happen that will completely pull the rug out from under us.
Mhm.
But to actually start to factor that reality into the way we live and plan and inhabit what happens next that we didn't expect, um, that to me would be an element of spiritual evolution.
Mhm. Yeah, I totally agree. Let's come back to that in a minute. I want to say that without beating this horse deader than it already is, I want to say that what a lot of what you've been saying does strike me as a model of leadership in this new era of the human journey. Um, and I think it takes courage to be that kind of leader, that listening, dialogical kind of leader in classrooms and congregations where basically people will say to such a leader, hey, don't ask me what I think. Don't ask her what she thinks. Don't ask him what he thinks. We're paying you to tell us what to think. It takes guts to be a transformational leader who engages people in dialogue when people think that they've signed a contract to be told what to
Right.
think and what to do. So I'll leave it there, but I don't know. I think part of my mission in life is to get you to own up to being a leader.
Okay, well, that may take a couple of decades.
Well, you've got them, but I have to hurry with my job at age 86. So so let me go back to the spiritual question. And with Teilhard de Chardin, one of the things I love about science is that scientists know how to learn from failure, right?
Yes, yes.
Scientists know how to learn from the hypothesis that doesn't prove out. They know how to learn
Yeah.
from negativity, and they don't let it defeat them. And I'm thinking about Teilhard de Chardin, who, as he made that transition from science into spirituality, said something that's been with me for a very long time. He said, we have to understand that we are hallowed by our diminishments.
Mm,
It's a beautiful, beautiful phrase,
yeah,
especially when you
yeah,
get to an age where physical and maybe mental diminishment becomes just part of the deal. It's part of the territory. So I'm just wondering about your vision the kind of spirituality, and again, I'm not looking for a set of propositions here. I'm looking for a process that we seem that seems to be evolving as you have your conversations with such a wide range of folks in so many different fields. How do you understand the trajectory of our spiritual evolution?
I have to tell you that I've been a little distracted by Google or Zoom or somebody, some of this on saying, popping up a screen that says, it sounds like you might have switched to a different language, which actually, I feel like we are speaking a different language from our cultural language. So very clever, AI.
Yeah, that same thing happened here. I
We
thought
have to speak a different, we literally have to engage a different conversation within ourselves and with each other, and then merely the materialistic, the productivity conversation, right? The external accomplishment as the measure of the quality of our lives. Worth, wealth as worth. And I see that emerging. I do see it emerging. I see new generations now, in part, this was what we've been living with, so much unreality that we thought we were being so smart, right? But just like this, the truth is about life, and it's true collectively as it is individually or in a family, that things are constantly going wrong or not according to plan. That is actually how we grow, and that is how life progresses, whether we like it or not. And we have been living, I feel like we've been living with this American dream, which we infected the whole world with, that basically would have repealed the laws of physics. Everything will go up, nothing will come down. Your children will have it better than the last, with a very narrow version of what better meant.
Right.
And so now I feel like there's this new generation where it's standing on the ground of reality, but it's a hard place to land. And I think it's hard for people who, their parents' generation who grew up with this, and the death of a dream in a human body is especially a dream for your children. But I feel like new generation, when I say they're being more spiritual, I also think they're being more reality based, and they're saying, well, what really does matter in my life, and what does better mean? I remember my daughter Allie, who you've met, Parker, somehow she was learning about, because Darwinism, which we don't even, Darwin and survival of the fittest is not even what he wrote for the first five versions of. So he wrote fit, like fit for purpose, fit for place. Not this competitive fittest. And Allie said to me once, when she was very young, she said, Mom, we're defining what fit means. And I think that's right. And I think it is based on reality. And I think it is, I'm not going to say it's spiritual. I think spiritual is, first of all, one of the things we're learning about our bodies and brains and just functioning is like all these things that we've named as physical, emotional, spiritual, they're all interactive. They're all intertwined. There's no taking them apart. Right. And so even to say that it's more spiritual, it's more whole, right? Mm-hmm. Like what they are reaching for is, I think, to me, that is a word that I'm latching onto in terms of what would spiritual evolution look like. And wholeness knows that not only will things keep going wrong, but some of the things that went the most wrong for you were the things that made you who you are. And what I've learned, in these lives of wisdom and grace that I, was drawing on for the book, is that is a quality of a wise life, that somebody is who they are, not in spite of what has happened to them. And you're such a perfect example of this, but because they have learned what they had to learn and grown as they could grow, whether they wanted that experience or not. and integrated that onto their home, into their wholeness on the other side.
Mm-hmm.
But we live in a society still that, and very much right now, it's like weakness is a punishable offense, right?
Yeah, right.
Vulnerability is, and is terrifying and unacceptable. Because your vulnerability reminds me of my vulnerability, and we are in a period of wanting to deny that. I think we're living in a time of incredible fear, a lot of which is reasonable, and a body in fear, is not rising to its highest human capacities. But even as we learn about the body, it's like we're learning, like Western medicine, which is so much a part of this Enlightenment mentality, was like about looking at the big parts, right? The big organs that you could take and put on a slab and dissect. Now we're learning that so much of our vitality is about the soft tissue and the ligaments, not the muscles, right? These fluid pathways that actually hold it all together, the vagus nerve that connects all the way through the body, these connective tissue. It's like a physical representation of what we have to learn in our lived lives, in our life together. It's fascinating to me. Like, if we can stop, I think we should give ourselves like fascination pauses right now in the midst of all there is, to, like, you read the newspaper or the news feed, and that takes you to another place.
Yeah, I like that a lot. It's almost time, I'm afraid, because I've loved this conversation.
Yeah, Bilal, my friend who's here, and I love you, Bilal. He says fascinating as in fascia, which is the name for all these, some of these fluid, flexible, nimble, soft,
very nice.
the softness in us.
Yeah, very, very nice. Yeah. It's almost time now to invite our friend Felipe back in with questions from the audience. I just want to say that I'm disappointed to learn that message that came up about speaking a different language was from Zoom. I thought it was from God. And so there we go again, disappointment drill. I'll make the best of it.
Parker, we don't know what God's relationship is to this technology. It could very well be from God, for all we know.
Even Google?
The divine spark.
Oh, thank you. That helps. Felipe,
Yes, sir.
You got some questions for us?
I do. And actually, the first question is from your friend Bilal, Krista. The question that they asked is, how do we reinvent so many institutions while having our needs being met tied to the current institutions?
Yeah. Well, first of all, none of us is called to reinvent all the institutions. And none of us is called to reinvent anything that is not in the world that we can see and touch. And one of the great distractions, and I think sources of distress in this world, is that we have so much information and we have so much coming at us about the whole wide world, about every institution. And so I think part of a spiritual discipline for just being alive is distinguishing between that which you touch and that which is even just knowing that what is the world around me that I can see and touch, and what I do. And that question about being captive to the institutions is a serious one. I mean, it's like I think the question for so many of us is like, what is my agency in this time? What is my agency? And I think that is a question to live. I think I'm taking Rilke more seriously than he even took himself. I actually think we could all right now, as a life discipline, formulate and spend some time formulating like your variation on that question of what is my agency, what is my work to do. And that may be inside that may have to do with an institution that also oppresses you, and it may be that institution that oppresses you is other work, that's not what you can change, but somebody else needs to be called to that.
Thank you. Next question from Raymond. Do you have insights or tips on how to ask better, more generous questions?
Um, so it's like there are the questions you ask of yourself, and there are questions you might ask of others. But I think you know, a truly curious question, as opposed to just a curious sounding question, wants to be surprised. So I think asking a question that is big enough and like aspirational enough, for there to be surprise in what comes back. Sometimes asking a more generous question of another person, especially if they're really different from you and maybe even seem to be on another side of things from you. I think so. I'm just saying, as a journalist, I was trained in kind of the hard question, and we have a lot of examples of that. But really, I think that is a distraction. Like that, the hard question makes the question asker sound tough, but probably will shut the other person down or embarrass them or leave them. And if that's what you're looking for, it can be very effective. But I think the generous question with another human being can sound really simple, right? Like it doesn't have to be a lofty question. I think we live in this time of trigger words, and we're just we set each other off with how we say things or what we choose to say first. I think having someone use a word or a phrase that might be troubling to you or make you uncomfortable, not a phrase of hatred, but there's plenty between hatred and troubling and discomfort making. Just to ask with genuine curiosity, tell me what you mean when you use that word, and probably the connotations it has in that other life they're not everything that we inhabit such different worlds. And so I think we really can't assume that anybody means what we would mean when we speak about anything or when we use a word, especially if we don't know them. Also, I think when something feels abstract, you can always ask, like, is there a story you can tell me about that? Like, you kind of pin it to the ground. um you know the Benedictines who trained me in Parker, I know I've talked to you about this, they would ask a great big lofty question and then say, but answer the question through the story of your life.
Mm-hmm.
And if you can have that conversation with someone and you have enough time, this is not for a 5-minute answer. Perhaps some big thing that really divides, it seems you are on different sides of the line. Who did you vote for? Answer the question through the story of your life. I think it will be revelatory. And if you really want to hear, you have to really want to hear it. It's your desire to really know and to actually be stretched and surprised at what makes the question generous. The spirit in which it's asked. Because we meet each other at an animal level as much as at a cognitive level. So that's what the other person will sense.
If I could, I'm not going to take up much time because this is your time, but just very quickly, just a week ago, I experienced the power of exactly what you're talking about. I invited a local evangelical Christian minister to my home. He and I know that we differ radically on what it means to be a Christian in this time in terms of politics. But I said to him, I don't want to talk about that today. I'm just really interested in your journey. And he said, I'm glad to talk about my journey if you'll talk about yours. And I said, of course I will. So over a cup of coffee, a cup of tea, we had an hour and a half, which I found deeply moving because there were so many points of congruence or convergence between moments in his journey and mine that connected and crossed paths at a very soulful level, as when we made decisions that nobody around us could understand. Did we resolve our theological differences? Of course not. But that wasn't the aim. The aim was to create a container in which that would be strong enough to allow us to continue the great conversation. And the next morning he said, could we do that again? So I think we're moving in that direction. So just a quick story about the power of story.
Thank you both for that. Next question is from Michael. Isn't wisdom about more than truth? Isn't it about life as a whole? How to best understand life and respond fruitfully to life as it encounters us in all its complexity?
Yes. I think what I meant, what I was making the distinction about, that a wise life is not merely something that can be described factually. It is about truth inhabited and lived, that transmits to others. But yeah, it is about how you live, right? It is embodied. You know, I often use this phrase, lives of wisdom and grace. But I think what's in that for me is that wise lives are graceful lives, right? They're lives that have, where there's a developed character and conscience, and there's been an investment in those things, right? There's been practice in those things. One of the teachings, one of the things we're learning through neuroscience that I just love is that it's as true for qualities of character as it is for like skills, like playing the piano or throwing a ball, that what you practice, you become. And I feel like, you know, it's not like, I think that there's a, you know, to some extent, a fallacy that we kind of think, well, that person is wise, they're courageous, they're patient, they're kind, they were born that way. But I actually think, you know, in a wise life, you have a human being, so they're working with flawed materials, right? But it's what they've honed, it's what they've leaned into, it's what they have reinforced in their lives, and therefore, as we're now learning, like how they've kind of wired their brains, their neural networks, and connected their bodies, and you know, in more consciously, I think, inhabited this interactivity between our bodies and what we call emotion and what we call spirit and what we call heart. But as I say, like, so they touch other lives, and that says everything, right? Because they've touched other lives because there is a truth and a wholeness and a magnetism, and a strength, right? A real strength, not just you know, a strength that has depth and grace to it, that transmits then to others.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. We got two more questions to ask before we're done here. So this next question is from Marta. Marta says, what is a wise response to people or organizations that distort or utterly dismiss facts in today's context? For example, how can I do more than just fall silent in astonishment when I encounter this? I could use a decent comeback.
You know, I was with one of the, I think a really wise person in our world right now, David Bornstein. Parker, you know David too, right? Solutions Journalism Network. And I was doing an event with him with a bunch of citizens, and somebody said, like, what can we do about misinformation? Or, you know, information sources that are manipulative, that, you know, or people who believe things that aren't true, right? Aren't factually true. And David said, there's not much we can do about that, honestly. But he said, what can make a difference if we are communicating with someone about I think this kind of, it's kind of thing I was drawing on him when I was speaking a little while ago. When we're communicating with that about that with a person, is if they think we actually, not just that we want them to believe us or know what we know, but do they care? Why do that it matters, and that we care because we're in relationship, and also that it is a conversation, and I am also in listening mode, in true curiosity mode. I want you to surprise me. I'm going to be happy if I'm going to be delighted to be surprised, and I am also here to learn something. That doesn't, again, like just what you said a minute ago, Parker, it doesn't resolve anything, but it opens up so much possibility. And I think a paradox of our time is, when we talk about information, misinformation, competing facts, those are these, mega realities of our world. But I don't think there's any way around the fact that the healing has to happen person to person, relationship to relationship, community to community. We are sent back to the human level of everything.
If I could just add one quick word to that, scholars have proven that the great movements of our time did not require everyone to get on board, or even 90%, or even 50%, or it's a small critical mass that needs to constellate in order to trigger a movement for the human possibility.
I walk through the world with that now too, and I find that a really, really helpful truth. Yeah.
Thank you both. And now for the last question, and I apologize for the questions that were later on the queue, but we don't have much time. This question comes from Guard. He asks both of you, how do you see the importance of compassion?
Compassion holds so many, it involves so many qualities of a life of wisdom and grace. It's a virtue, but it involves so many other virtues like kindness and empathy, and I think a hospitable spirit, and I think Karen Armstrong, I remember her talking. I mean, I think like all the words we love, they get watered down and overused and Hallmark carded, and like passion is not pity, right? Or I think Roshi Joan Halifax, has talked about like there's such a thing in our time as pathological empathy, where you think you have to care about anything and shut you down from actually caring about anything. I think compassion sees and enjoys and wants the best for, and is able to stay open to accompanying that, to being part of that, right? It's such a big one, right? It's like love, and of course it's connected. It's often connected to love the action, not necessarily the feeling. It's such, we live in a time, and I do believe our technologies can reinforce this, where we're kind of pulled down, right? We're pulled to our more base instincts. And again, we're all, so much of us are living in fear. And that just, literally gets us into our lizard brains, as they say, like the most ancient, primitive, simple parts of our brains that turn everything and everyone into an either or. I think, when we talk about asking better questions, these are aspirational questions. These are questions that call us to something. And I think compassion, fully fleshed, is an aspirational virtue. It's big. And it's not something that you ever get perfect at. So it's always calling you to stretch yourself and to deepen and to look up and out.
My
How do you think
answer,
about it? Yeah, I
my
want to hear
answer,
you.
my answer, Felipe, is I'll have what she's having.
That works.
Very grateful for this movement, this organization, this movement, this like worldwide community that the Charter for Compassion represents. I'm so happy to be part of this event.
Me too. And good to be with you, my friend.
All right. Thank you both so much for this incredible conversation. I'm sure that I'm speaking for everyone that is watching either through Zoom, Facebook, LinkedIn, or YouTube. Thank you. What a great, 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 incredible, enlightening conversation. I just wanted to take a very, very short time to let people know about all the things that are happening with the Charter for Compassion. So I added on the chat our link tree that has all the links for the upcoming events that I'm going to be mentioning here. So first we have our monthly Charter Sangha, which is an opportunity to meditate, to have someone quiet, commune with other people virtually. And we do it every last Saturday of the month. This time would be Saturday, April 26th at 9 a.m. Pacific time. You can register with the link that I've sent there. Marilyn Turkovich, our executive director, has a webinar that goes every Wednesday where she connects the harmony of humanity through music and times and eras of humanity. Every Wednesday at 8 a.m. Pacific time. Next, we have our EdNet Forum, Prison Narratives, on May 15th at 7:30 a.m. And that's going to be in our event calendar. Again, you can check that out on our link tree. And our following global read is Stage Warrior by Valerie Carr. And we are very excited to have her, and the host will be Gard Jameson, part of our board of trustees. Last but not least, I wanted to let you all know that we have our Compassionate Action Conference, Transforming the World Together, on May 14th and 15th. We're very excited to be hosting this virtual event for everyone around the world. Check it out on our website as well, and you will have more information there. Our award-winning documentary, The Spirit of Ubuntu, is now freely available on Bing TV and YouTube for you to watch. It's an incredible documentary following 10 different people in the African continent, talking about Ubuntu, the principles we are because, I am because we are. And last but not least, we have our different community chats, healthcare sector on May 2nd at 8:30, Allies in Action for the US Pacific on Thursday, April 24th, UK Specific chat on April 29th, Community Collaboration Ambassador Program on Wednesday, April 30th, and last but not least, Allies in Action in Florida, specifically for the state of Florida, on April 30th. My friends, thank you again, once again, for taking the time, for sharing this conversation, for everyone that attended. This recording will be available on our YouTube channel, and if you register, you will receive an email with the link so that you can rewatch this as many times as you want. Again, thank you all very much, and we'll be seeing you in our next Global Read in May.
Blessings.
Thank you.
Bye.